And we're back, and we've got a special guest, Paul Brennan from Bring Our Birds Home. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Gerard.
Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me on the program. Great to be here.
Some of you may recognise, well, it's not his face, it's actually his hair that gets talked about on Facebook and other mediums. Paul is on a program on Face TV called Checkpoint, occasionally reading the news on John Campbell's show, so there's a connection there.
Yep, there is.
But also, Paul, you're one of the few people that's come into our studio here and been able to recognise all three aircraft, the one behind you.
Yeah.
And the two on the wall.
I felt I was being put to a bit of a test there, so I'm glad I came up. I've got some nice pictures here.
I went to great expense getting the one behind you. It cost me $1 gazillion.
American Airlines LC-188. Yeah, nice.
And I just explained to you the old Pan Am plane behind me was a photo taken by an old aunt of mine on a box brownie camera.
It's a beautiful picture, that. A beautiful aircraft, a sad ending to that. Edward, Captain Music, of course, a famous pioneer of the Pacific Airways for Pan American, and that aircraft is what did it for them. But unfortunately, a few years after that picture was taken, he came to an end in that aircraft.
Well,
but we'll ignore that. But such was the that was the development of long-distance flying.
You wouldn't put up with that reliability percentage these
No,
days.
well, it depends on what the fare was. I mean, if it was a good deal, you'd have to weigh it up, wouldn't you? I don't know.
Now, you're involved in a unique cause, I'd call it, and what you're attempting to do is bring back to New Zealand some very historic aircraft that flew for NAC and Air New Zealand. So
Correct.
give us a brief summary of what you're up to.
Okay, so this came out of a little exercise between a few enthusiasts. I'm an enthusiast, and I like to sort of track the movement of some of the aircraft that we've known in the past in this country, where they've ended up. And you sort of get used to these days seeing that they've been taken to the desert. Back in the day, all the DC-8s were taken to the desert and mainly broken up. And you got to move quick to save airframes. And the remarkable thing was that it turned out, as it turned out at the time, there was one example of the 5 types that we were looking that were originals left, and that was it. So obviously, once you find that out, you think, well, is anyone going to do anything? I mean, should someone make a move? First of all, are these precious? Yes, they are. I value them, and I've been saying in what we talk about that they're sort of modern day equivalents of the ancestral waka. Essentially those wakas that cross the ocean with people and taking cultures to other places, it's the same mission. It's just 700 years separates them. So if they're precious and they have a significance, these must have. So once you understand that they're the final ones there, and if you assign that level of importance to them, you either sit there and do nothing, or you swing into action and you try and do something. And that's what I decided to do. I sort of got a bit of media power and a bit of profile, and got some people I know who are motivated to help as well. So we decided to do something, and of course it's like going down the rabbit hole a bit. It all seems so straightforward at the start, but once you get into, and we've got 5 of them, understanding where they are, how they've got there, who owns them, who is the guardians of them, everything becomes sort of like a story in itself. So between the time we started and now, so many things have happened. We've lost a few along the way that turned out that information was wrong. They've been scrapped before, not too long before we came along, which is a blow, because one of them was an NAC aircraft, the 737 NAD, second one delivered, which flew the first domestic jet service in New Zealand. Accidentally, a Viscount broke down, and they brought it in. They had 2 in the country for training. And they decided to bring this and put it on for one flight. So that would have been great, but unfortunately it had been scrapped. And I talked to the guy who scrapped it, and they scrapped it because people kept trying to break into it. So, it wasn't even a good reason, really. So, but yeah, we decided to have a go and to find out where they were, who owned them, and the mission is to get them back, and we're sort of getting there. We're very close to one. And I think when we make that announcement, if we get there, it's going to please a lot of people, because we're talking about the DC-8 there, because that really is a line in the sand for this country. If you'll know, anyone who's got any travel history knowledge will know that, that basically ended the experience of going on a ship.
It ended isolation for New Zealand.
Totally, yeah, and on their own airline too. So we could fly up to LA and around the Pacific, and it was a state-of-the-art machine. You know, the DC-8 was a great performer. So, you know, that's part of our cultural and social history as well as our transportation history.
The DC-8 interests me, and I said when we've been talking before you came up, I said the DC-8 and probably the DC-10 are the two I'd like to just focus on today.
Sure.
One of the reasons the DC-8, I have fond memories of that going out in the old days when someone was travelling, the whole family, the neighbours, just about everyone went to the airport. And the aunt that took that picture of the Pan Am aircraft was going to Sydney. So I think about 20 of us went out to see her go out.
Big occasion.
She was dressed up, we were all dressed up. And out at Mangere at the what is now the domestic, or part of the domestic terminal, we're all there. And there's photos of us with hundreds of us in it.
Yeah, I've seen lots of old publicity shots and memorabilia that people have sent in. That's been another wonderful thing. It's uncovered so many pictures, just as you described. You know, with women with gloves.
Like the picture behind
you. Yeah,
it
was a real occasion. It wasn't just, oh, here we go on the bus again. It was,
now I see on some flights there's people shorts, jandals, and the bare feet up on the wall.
And all the cabins had the you know, the imprinted panels and all custom made, and those DC-8 seats. I've never seen anything like them. They're just out there. They had the little speakers between them. You see them across all the airlines had DC-8s. It must have been a Douglas feature, but Air New Zealand had those. Of course, we had our own colours, though. All the upholstery was in our colours. So. But yeah, it was an occasion. And I agree with you. I think that's what we've found in the feedback. The DC-8 and the DC-10 is what really interests people. And I guess that makes sense maybe in a generational terms, but the DC-8... Well, the DC-8 for the reasons that you gave and we just talked about, but also the DC-10 has a very interesting position, and we could... You know, we could talk about there's the elephant in the room one, the Erebus thing, and that may have some significance if we can get this thing back. But also, again, it was a game changer, wasn't it? It was wide-bodied. It started to build the tourism industry. Initially, we could bring the people in. It had, I think, better range than the DC-8, so we go further. It went all the way to London. BA had that deal. So I go along with that. Those are the two popular ones, and those are the ones that Jared, we're going hard as we can to get.
So let's look at those two. They are both not quite in the same area, but one's in Manaus in Brazil, and the other one is currently in Havana, Cuba. So.
DC-8, when Air New Zealand got rid of the DC-8s, NZC was one of the last passenger aircraft that they let go. They kept, I think, NZD and converted it to a freighter, and that stayed through the 80s. And they went to Marana Park, and then they all got distributed out to different carriers. Some of them went, I think, to Flying Tiger cargo airline, or one of the airlines associated with it ended up being FedEx, but they never operated the DC-8. NZC went to a bunch of different carriers. Went to a Canadian carrier, flew for Fawcett, Peru, was converted to a freighter, went to Brazil, I think converted in the mid-90s, and operated through until 2004 for a company that was a subsidiary of a larger company called Beta Cargo Airlines. They went under, they went belly up, owing a lot of money. You know, that's been part of the sort of delay in getting to this, because it's been caught up in a bankruptcy that's been festering away for a long time, and involves huge number of assets. I think 20 aircraft are involved, including that one. So unpicking that's been an interesting thing. But that's good, because of my point before, where these things are easily lost. If it hadn't got caught up in a place like that,
would have been lost.
It would have been lost. It would have been lost. It would have been trashed, melted down ages ago. But thankfully, this cargo airline went belly up and just left everything where they were. And this aircraft was Manaus, Brazil, which is a sort of crazy location. If you look at the pictures, it's in the middle of the jungle. I didn't know anything about the place until I got involved in this. It's pretty sad. If you're rolling any of the pictures, a bit of a sad state of repair. But
well, I think one of the sponsors that has to come on board is Wet and Forget, because it looks like it just needs a good...
Well, that's a great idea. Yeah, it needs a blast down. And, I've actually had one person go and actually have a look at it now, and they say it's not too bad. I mean, it's sort of weathered it quite well. It's mouldy and stuff like that, and it's probably full of all sorts of stuff. No one's looked inside it for a while. But if we get it, we'll have to dismantle it, obviously, ship it back. But it should when it's reassembled and brought back to display condition, I'm told it can look like the day it came off the production line. So you can imagine what that would.
And when in those days, they were shiny.
The underneath metal and everything.
Yeah, beautiful,
polished.
Mirror.
In fact, I think they used to have designated maintenance guys who actually just polished the metal. You know.
We'll need a few volunteers for that.
Yeah. That's why American Airlines have gone to paint now. It costs them too much. Yeah.
And the other aircraft that I
DC-10.
think sort of next on your list at the moment is the DC-10.
The DC-10, we are talking now with the Cuban embassy. I've talked with the ambassador there. He's been back in Cuba the last few weeks on business. He's, he was really understanding of what we wanted to do. And I emphasised there's more than just a couple of old dudes wanting to get some old machinery. This is, and took him through the history. He was unaware of the Erebus situation, and stuff. So once he got that, he thought, okay, I see where you're coming from. I'll go back, and when I'm there, I'll ask a few questions. So I got a meeting with him next week, and really, it could go either way. It could either be very complicated, or the top guy, Raul Castro, could just say, give it to them, and we'll get it. So don't quite know how that's going to go. The mission with the DC-10 is, because it's so big, dismantling it and transporting it is a bit of an issue. The airport is about 15, the shortest route from the airport to the port is 15 Ks, and you've got to go through
town.
yeah. But I mean, the French take the A380 through villages, so it can be done. It just depends on having the motivation and will to do it. But that aircraft is in remarkably good condition, considering it's been sitting there for about as long as the DC-8. Again, and then another airline's gone belly up, left everything where it was, Air Lib, which was, I think, out of AOM, which was a French charter carrier back in the day. And now it's used as a instructional airframe for Cubana mechanics and apprentices. So maybe we'll have to try and replace it if they want to carry on with something like that. There are ways of doing that. There are plenty of airliners being retired that could be flown there, and we could do a swap. So, but I'm sort of confident about that too. You can tell when you talk to people who can help you, when they get it, there's like a new motivation comes in. Oh, I see. All right, this is a great thing for your country.
We're on board.
Yeah. We'll see what we can do. They're happy to help.
Now, the other three aircraft currently, if you can just quickly tell us where they are and what they're doing.
Well,
two
one
of them are
behind
still
us.
flying.
Well, three of them are still flyable. Two are still in service. We've got the Electra there. One of them, of course, is one of our Electras. The second one delivered, TB, in '59, and that I was amazed to hear. Because when we were looking, that was the only one actually still flying when we started. I couldn't believe the oldest one was still flying. They've just completely rebuilt it to be a water bomber, fight fires. So we've talked to Buffalo Airways in Canada who operate it, and they had a series ice pilots.
It's looking pretty sharp in this picture.
It's incredible. Yeah. I've got some footage of it too. But they think they'll have that for another 8 years, until Lockheed will not support the product anymore, and they've given them a time frame of that. They just don't make parts. They won't guarantee any of the life promises on components, so they're going to have to stop. At that point, we can get it. So that's sitting there. That flies. I think it flew last week. They had some fires in Canada a week or two ago. I actually was involved in that. I mentioned the 737. That was a disappointment because NAD was lost, but just as soon as we discovered that wasn't there, another one popped up on the radar, which is truly the only one left now, and that is Air New Zealand 73, not a NAC, but 82 delivered NQC. For those who maybe paid attention, that was the one with the cargo door on the front. I call it New Zealand's hardest working airliner. It carried 2.8 million passengers and 180,000 tonnes of freight in 30 years, operating, I worked it all out, 6.5 days a week for virtually every year of those 30 years. Flying
daytime and night. 6
sectors a day from 6:30 in the morning to 8 at night, and then up to 2 return trips, Auckland to Christchurch, courier. And I used to hear it in Wellington flying over at night. I could tell, there goes NQC, because you could hear the roar of that. The Pratt and Whitneys, So that's the little engine that could. So it was disappointing not to have an original NAC 73. That would have been fantastic, and the one that flew the first, but I mean, it wasn't there. But this one also has a spot in the history. And New Zealand probably wouldn't be what it is today without the 737. It really did build the internal travel of the country, like no other plane, like it has everywhere. We were considering the 111, BAC 111 back in the day. The British government sent their trade people out there, really forced their hand. And of course, there was a DC-9 flying at the time, but they chose the 73. They chose wisely, and we operated for 48 years. So that's a great example to have. And then there's the 747, and that's probably launched many an OE, that aircraft for New Zealanders. We thought we had the first one, NZV, which was parked up at Domodedovo Airport in Moscow. And we had pictures of it and all that sort of stuff. And I went and saw the Russian embassy, and they gave me a contact for the receiver of Transaero Airlines, which wound it up. Now, people might hear that name again shortly, because the two aircraft that Boeing built for them that's sitting in the desert now are going to become the new Air Force Ones.
I saw that yesterday.
So anyway, I talked to the receiver of, by phone in Moscow, of Transaero, and in sort of broken English, he said, "Mr. Brennan, I am so sorry to say it has been scrapped." And then he said, "How do I know that?" He says, "I had it scrapped." So, okay, we had it. So
like they do in Russia, things just disappear overnight.
Yeah, well,
things and people.
Yeah, well, that's right, yeah. So that was unfortunate. We didn't get that in time. That was in 2015. But then, as it turned out, the only remaining Air New Zealand 74 in the world now is MBV, which is the last one that was delivered to Air New Zealand in '98, and that's flying for a Spanish airline at the moment, Wamos Air, owned by an American company, and it's probably got about another 2 or 3 years of life before it's prohibitively expensive to overhaul it. And we've got I should make the point, we've got the first right of refusal on those 3 aircraft. The 737's in Canada, it's parked up at the moment, but still flyable. We're trying to sell it, but no one's buying. And the 74 is operating in Spain, but you know, it's easy enough to fly it back when it's done. And it's literally, at the end of its service, it's literally worthless. This is the thing, that they really have no value now.
Can't fix it no more.
And also the new aircraft are coming on so quickly, and the efficiency gains with engine and airframe performance is such that even if gas is cheap, it's still not cheap enough to make it viable to, you know, if you're going to get 400 people in a 747 to make it pay, unless you've got huge passenger numbers, it ain't going to work. So it all works in our favour. So yeah, those are the other 3.
So when we get these
definitely thinking
back,
when now.
Yeah. We get these aircraft back to New Zealand, what's your vision for them?
Jared, I try not to think too far ahead. It's all about saving them right now. One thing I've discovered with Kiwis, when you talk about these sorts of projects and the scale of them, I don't know whether Muldoon spooked us all with Think Big or something like that, but the fact that it's big sort of worries people. They think, that's too big. But when I start breaking it down for them, they start to understand. But I think, so I only think as far as saving them, because people can understand that. Yeah, well, of course, yeah, you save it. But of course, what do you do with them? I think they can be incredible attractions. I'd like to see them as a group and not distributed. And I think that if we can get them into one place, and it could be any part in the country where there's a good port, reasonable space at the local airfield, enough to land an empty 747 if it's got the pavement strength. You need about 4,800 feet to do that safely. They did it in Sydney or New South Wales recently with the Qantas's first 744. They landed at a little provincial airport. So anywhere where there's a port, we can get the derelicts, as they call them, in, and enough runway to land the thing is a goer. So it depends on what region is interested in enhancing their attractions, I think, as to who will be interested. But having experience and knowing people who operate other aviation museums around the world, I think build it and they will come, definitely. And we're starting to get some sort of interest sort of bubbling away. I've had a few inquiries, you know, kicking the tires, what do you intend to do with them? I'd like to see them in Auckland because the population base is there. It's basically an Auckland story. Yes. These aircraft were based in Auckland. Air New Zealand's Auckland. The tourism activity, it's the gateway, is Auckland. There are places, I mean, the airport has become a huge retail and business centre as well as being an airport. I mean, that can only enhance this. And I think in the scale of expenditure and overhead for something like this, it's relatively modest for what it delivers and how long it delivers. Something like that could be there for 100 or more years, earning every day.
The other little bonus with Auckland is that all the politicians are now going to put a light rail line, so it's going to be easy to get
Oh, there
to.
you go. Yeah, it's going to be easy. Yeah, you either step off the plane, arrive and go have a look, or get on the train.
If we're quick, we could make this an election issue. We just need one of the parties to say they're going to back it, and
Yeah.
they'll all be in.
Well, I would hope that, I would seriously hope, and I haven't really done it yet because, as I say, we're only thinking so far. The mission is now to get them, to save them. But after that, I would expect there to be some interest. If these people are on their game and they're really thinking about, putting stuff in place to attractions and celebrating our history. See, here's the other thing. It's not just the machines, it's the people who are involved. I think we worked out across those 4 airframes, they've transported nearly 10 million individual people. That's a lot of people. You line them all up.
There's a lot of people with memories of them.
Exactly, and you've got 5 planes that all intersects right there. Not only that, we discussed before, it changed that distance issue. We were a modern country when we did this sort of thing. We were standing up with the best of them. And I can tell you, I know in the NAC case, some of those early NAC 737 pilots, they were so good that Boeing hired them after they retired to be consultants. In fact, the flying qualities of the 737 Classics is pretty well down to the operations manager of NAC, Alan Kenning, the late Alan Kenning. He did a lot of the early control, in-flight control consulting to harmonise the controls and all that back in the prototype days. I never knew that until recently. So we've been involved.
We're all learning.
We've been involved in these machines in more ways than one.
Now, I think hopefully soon you'll be perhaps heading to Brazil to do some deals.
Well, it could be any time. We've got in the latest video update on our Facebook page, I mentioned, and that's the other thing. Social media and crowdfunding makes this possible. It couldn't have been done before, and the following tells me that there's a lot of interest. We've put a letter in front of the management of Infiero, who own the airport at Manaus, who ultimately have the say. It's turned out there have been 2 failed auctions and a tender to get rid of these things before no one's even put in a bid, because there's no value, you see. It's taking up valuable space. My intuition is that will be positively received, and it'll be the price, but then I'll have to go, because, and then we'll have to negotiate terms. I'm just hoping they're not watching, just hand it over, because it gets it. But, someone's got to say, well, at least we got something for it. But if people have been watching the Facebook page, they'll know that recently the German government have purchased a Lufthansa 737 out of Brazil, derelict since the 90s, mid-90s, I think. If people want to look it up, Lufthansa 181 was hijacked to Mogadishu, Somalia in 78, I think. The pilot was killed. It was a terrible thing. Well, they've bought that. I know how much they've paid for that. So we don't expect to pay anything more.
So how can our viewers help?
I think
we've got quite a few viewers.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that
ready and waiting. And
I think they can maybe follow the Facebook page, because that's where it all comes together. That's where I put all the updates. And when I say where, there's a few of us, but I'm the front person, obviously. It's totally what is almost exactly what we know in real time. So it's this sort of unfolding events that will they, won't they? So if people go there, they'll be right up to date. And just, first of all, be positive, because I think that helps in some sort of whatever way. But then, when we need the money, because we will need the money,
start giving.
Give. and the sums we're talking about are pretty modest. If you think about that beach that people bought, we're way below that.
There you are. It's a worthy cause, so you can go to Paul's Give a Little page, which we've put on the bottom of the screen here.
Fantastic.
And if you don't know how to do that, ask a young one. They'll be able to help. All you need is your credit card.
Well, now I'm impressing my kids now with my social media skills.
You're getting right up there.
Yeah, well, they know how to do it now. Yeah.
Well, we wish you all the best of luck. And
Thank
it's
you.
customary on Bon Voyage TV for all our guests to take home a bottle of
Oh,
Vivo
thank you
wine.
so much. I thought you'd give me the Concorde.
No, that's mine.
Thank you so much.
Take that and share it with your co-conspirators.
Yeah.
And
tell you what, we'll hang on to this, and when we get this DC-8, we'll pop this.
excellent. So all the best.
Yeah.
And
Thank you,
we
Jared.
will
Appreciate
keep you updated with Paul's endeavours. He's promised to send back some footage and keep us up to date. So as more happens, we'll let you know. All the best.
Sweet. Thanks so much.